Nobody remembered the score. 30 million people watched this video, and not a single one of them cared who won. What they saw was something so rare, so completely unscripted, that even Roger Federer had no words for it except two. The Eala effect. This is the full story of what really happened at Roland Garros 2026, and why a first-round loss became the most replayed moment of the entire French Open. Alex Eala walked onto the red clay of Roland Garros, carrying 110 million people on her back. Not metaphorically, literally. Filipinos in London had rearranged their work schedules. Filipinos in Dubai had set 3 a.m. alarms. Filipinos in New York had group chats going with 40 people sending prayers in all caps. This was not just a tennis match. This was a national event. Because Alex Eala is not just a tennis player to the Philippines. She is evidence. She is the living, breathing, racket-swinging proof that a girl from Manila can walk into the most prestigious tennis tournament on earth and make the best players in the world sweat for every single point. She was 17 when she became the first Filipino in history to win a junior Grand Slam singles title. The country lost its mind. 17 years old, and she was already rewriting what was supposed to be possible. At 18, the entire nation stayed up past midnight just to watch her play a match. Not a final, not a semifinal, a match, because that is what she meant to people. At 20, when her ranking cracked the top 50, Filipinos living abroad hung flags from apartment windows. In London, in Dubai, in New York, flag from a window, for a tennis ranking. That is the kind of love this young woman carried everywhere she went. So when she walked out for her first-round match against Velasquez, the stands were full of Philippine flags and full of faith. And Velasquez was good. She was sharp and composed and relentless, and she won 6-4, 6-2. Clean, decisive, and just like that, the flags in the stands began to fold. The dream, at least for this fortnight on the Parisian clay, was done. Alex Eala shook hands at the net, kept her face composed the way champions do even when they're breaking inside, and walked off the court. The world moved on. The tournament continued. Other matches began, and Alex Eala disappeared, or at least that was the plan. What nobody knew, what no broadcaster mentioned, what no journalist had written yet, was that 47 hours after that loss, a video would appear online that would be watched more than 30 million times in less than a day. And it had nothing to do with winning. It had everything to do with what happens when an entire nation refuses to let one of their own feel alone in their lowest moment. The day after the loss, Alex did something quietly extraordinary. She came back. Not to practice. Not for press. She pulled on a plain white hoodie, tied her hair back, took off the makeup, and found a seat in the players' box at Court Suzanne Lenglen to watch someone else compete. She was trying to vanish. She wanted to sit in the crowd and breathe the Roland Garros air and remember why she loved this sport even when it humbled her. She was not trying to be seen. She was not trying to perform recovery for anyone. She just needed to sit with the game she had given her whole life to and feel close to it again without the pressure of having to win. She never expected to become the center of anything that afternoon. The second-round match was already underway. The crowd was electric the way Roland Garros crowds always are in late May. That particular Parisian energy that feels like it is built into the clay itself, into the orange dust that coats everything and turns ordinary tennis into something almost sacred. And then the music started. Not the ambient stadium sound. Not a national anthem. A voice. One voice. Rising from the direction of the court. Clear and full and completely unmistakable. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. The crowd went silent. Not the polite silence of people waiting for something to end. The total silence of people who have just felt something move through them. Phones rose into the air by the hundreds. Players stopped mid-rally and turned. And standing at the baseline, microphone in hand, on a tennis court she had absolutely no business standing on, was Lea Salonga. 56 years old. Asia's songbird. A voice so singular it has been called a national treasure not by fans being dramatic, but by governments being factual. She has performed for heads of state. She has sold out Carnegie Hall. She has stood at the center of the most significant moments in Filipino history, the grief and the celebration and the defiance, for more than 3 decades. She had never stood on a tennis court before in her life. And yet in that moment, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be." The stadium held its breath for the entire song. And then the cameras found Alex Eala. Her hand had flown to her mouth. Her eyes were full. She was not performing. She was not smiling for the crowd the way athletes sometimes do when they know the cameras are on them. She was simply undone, the way people are when something reaches past every defense they have carefully constructed over years of discipline and pressure and public scrutiny, and touches the part of them that is most raw and most honest and most human. She was 21 years old, and she had just lost at the biggest clay court tournament on the planet, and someone had flown to Paris and walked onto a tennis court to sing to her. Not because she won, because she was her. Because she was Alex Eala, and that was enough. The applause when the song ended was not polite. It was the kind that starts in your chest before your hands even move. Thunderous, reverberating, the kind of sound that a stadium makes when everyone in it has just experienced something together that none of them will forget. But Regine Velasquez was not finished. She walked slowly toward the player's box, her gaze fixed on the young woman in the white hoodie who was trying to hold herself together and not quite managing it. The stadium quieted again, and in that quiet she spoke without a microphone and her voice still carried. "Alex," she said, "this is for you. Not because you won, because you fought, because you never gave up, because you reminded us that losing does not make you a loser." She extended her hand, and then she said two words that every Filipino in that stadium and every Filipino watching from thousands of miles away, in living rooms and hospital break rooms and office cubicles and kitchen tables across Southeast Asia, recognized the instant they heard them. "Laban Eala. Push." Alex Eala stood up on legs that were shaking. She reached out and took Regine's hand. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. And Regine smiled the way people smile when they have lived long enough to know that some moments are bigger than words. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "Just keep fighting. Keep being you. The rest will take care of itself." She pulled Alex into an embrace, and the crowd erupted. Not for a champion. For a fighter. For a girl who had lost and shown up anyway. The footage was everywhere within hours. 30 million views in 24 hours. Coco Gauff saw it and wrote just two words. "Wow. Just wow." Naomi Osaka posted it with the caption, "This is what love looks like." And Roger Federer, a man who has seen everything tennis can produce over a career spanning 3 decades, called it the Eala effect. Unstoppable. But why? Why did this moment spread the way it did? Why did people who had never heard of Alex Eala, people who have never watched a single minute of professional tennis, people who could not find the Philippines on a map without help, why did they watch this video and feel something shift in them? The answer starts somewhere most people would not expect. It starts with the weight of being someone's hope. When you carry a nation's dreams, and that is not an exaggeration in this case because the flags and the 3 a.m. alarms and the living rooms full of people praying prove it is not an exaggeration. When you carry all of that, winning feels expected and losing feels like a betrayal. Even when it is not. Even when you played beautifully. Even when your opponent was simply sharper that day. The love is real. The support is fuel. But underneath all of it is expectation. And expectation, even when it comes from a place of genuine love, can be the loneliest thing in the world to carry. Because what lives in the silence after a loss is not just the crowd's disappointment. It is the specific ache of feeling like you have let down people who believed in you completely. Alex Eala had been carrying that weight since she was a teenager. And in the hours after her loss at Roland Garros, she was carrying it alone. Until she wasn't. The morning after Regine's performance, the two women met for breakfast at a small cafe near the stadium. The owner, a Filipino expat who recognized both of them before they had ordered a single thing, quietly cleared the back room, brought out food and coffee, and then disappeared with the understanding of someone who knows when to leave a room. They sat across from each other, Asia's songbird and the girl who had become the brightest hope in Philippine tennis. Two women from the same country, from different generations, who had never met before and who already felt like family in the way that shared identity can make strangers feel like home. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Most of it was never recorded. But enough has been shared, through people close to both women, to understand what was said. And what was said in that back room of a Paris cafe matters more than anything that happened on a tennis court. Alex spoke first. She thanked Regine for coming, for the song, for making her feel like she had not failed. And then she said something that only someone who has stood in her position could fully understand. She said she was scared. not of losing. She had lost before. Every professional athlete loses. She was scared of becoming the player who always came close but never made it. The player people would one day speak about in the past tense, the way they speak about almost legends, the ones the world remembers with a particular kind of sadness, the ones who had everything except the result. What Regine said back was not a motivational speech. It was not something polished or rehearsed. It was the truth of someone who had actually lived it. She told Alex about albums that failed to chart, about performances that fell flat, about critics who had written in major publications that her voice had peaked, that she was finished, that the next generation had moved on and left her behind. She told Alex about the mornings she had woken up and genuinely considered walking away from everything she had built. And she told her why she didn't. I remembered why I started, Regine said. The love of it, the joy of it, and the people who still believed in me. That is how you keep going. Not by chasing perfection, by remembering why you began. There was a silence after that, long enough to mean something. And then Alex asked the question that had been sitting beneath everything else the entire time. The one she hadn't been able to ask out loud until this moment, in this back room, with this particular woman who understood in a way almost no one else could. What if it's never enough? She asked. What if I fight my whole career and it still doesn't happen? Regine looked at her for a moment before answering. And what she said did not offer false comfort. It did not promise outcomes that no one on this earth can promise. It offered something rarer. Perspective. Maybe you'll win a Grand Slam, she said. Maybe you won't. But Alex, listen to me. That is not what defines you. What defines you is what happened yesterday. A 56-year-old woman flew to Paris and stood on a tennis court in front of thousands of people to sing for you. Not because you were the champion. Because of who you are. The way you carry yourself. The way you fight. The way you make people feel like things are possible. That is not something you can practice. That is not something a trophy gives you. That is the Eala effect. And you already have it. Alex's eyes filled. She did not speak for a moment. And when she did, it was barely above a whisper. I didn't know you'd call it that, she said. And Regine smiled. Federer called it that. I'm just borrowing it. When they finally stood to leave, Regine pressed a small box into Alex's hands. Open it later, she said. Alex nodded, too full to speak, and slipped the box into her bag. She embraced Regine once more and stepped back out into the Parisian afternoon. The city was humming around her. The tournament was going on without her. And for the first time since the loss, she felt something other than the weight. That night, alone in her hotel room, she opened the box. Inside was a gold necklace, a simple chain with a small pendant cast in the shape of the Philippine archipelago. She turned it over in her palm. Engraved on the back in script so fine it was almost delicate were the words, Laban always. You are not alone. She put it around her neck. She stood in front of the mirror for a long time. And then she did something she had not been able to do since she landed in Paris. She slept. The next morning she packed. Roland Garros was behind her. The grass season was ahead. Wimbledon was weeks away. Her ranking, projected to drop from 37 to 42, would need to be rebuilt point by point and tournament by tournament. None of that had changed. The loss was still the loss. Professional tennis does not care about gold necklaces or standing ovations. The math is the math. But something inside her had shifted, quietly and permanently, in a way that rankings cannot measure and statistics cannot capture. At Charles de Gaulle Airport she arrived to something she had not expected. A small crowd had gathered near the Philippine Airlines check-in counter. Not photographers, not journalists, ordinary Filipinos, nurses and engineers and students who were living in Paris for work or study and had come on a weekday morning, on their own time, to see her off. They were holding flags. They were holding handwritten signs. Some of them were already crying before she even reached them. One of the signs read simply, Alex, you made us proud. We'll be here when you come back. Laban always. She moved through the crowd slowly, stopping for photographs and handshakes and embraces from strangers who did not feel like strangers. And then a little girl stepped forward. She could not have been older than 10. She was holding a drawing done in crayon on notebook paper. A stick figure with a tennis racket, a crown, and a Philippine flag. She held it out with both hands the way children offer things when they are completely certain of the value of what they are giving. I made this for you, she said. You're my hero, even when you lose. Alex knelt down. She took the drawing carefully, the way you take something that matters. I'll keep it forever, she said. I promise. A fan nearby captured the moment on a phone. Within hours, that image was everywhere. On the plane, as Paris fell away beneath the clouds, she looked out at the city she was leaving behind. Somewhere below was Roland Garros, where she had lost in the first round. Somewhere below was a courtside where a legend had sung for her. Somewhere below was a cafe where someone who understood had told her a truth she needed to hear. Her phone buzzed. A message from Regine. She opened it. You didn't win a match, Alex, but you won something more important. You won hearts. You won love. You won a song. And you have something around your neck to remind you that you are never alone. Now rest. The grass season is waiting. Laban. She read it twice. She typed back slowly. Thank you, Tita Regine. For the song, for the necklace, for believing in me. I'll carry this with me forever. Laban. She closed her eyes and touched the pendant at her throat. That small gold shape of home. And let herself breathe. Here is what is true. The 2026 French Open will be remembered for its champions. The names on the trophies will be catalogued. The rankings will shift and settle. Tennis will move on the way tennis always does. But the most replayed moment from Roland Garros that year was not a match point. It was not a final set. It was 30 seconds of a woman standing on a tennis court with a microphone singing to someone who had lost and meaning every single word. Because what Regine Velasquez did that afternoon was not just a gesture of national pride, though it was that. It was not just a viral moment, though it became one. It was an act of radical tenderness. In a world that celebrates winners relentlessly and forgets losers almost instantly, she stopped. She walked onto the clay, and she said with everything she had that the person who lost still mattered, that the fight still mattered, that love does not require a trophy to be real. And Alex Eala, 21 years old, ranked 37 in the world, first-round exit, gold necklace around her neck, crayon drawing folded carefully in her bag, flew home to prepare for the next chapter. Not broken, not diminished, something harder to define and far more durable than either of those things. She flew home ready. The question worth sitting with is this. When the next generation of Filipino athletes steps onto the world stage, inspired by everything they saw in Paris, by the flags and the chants and the voice that rang out across the red clay, will they remember the score? Or will they remember what the score could not contain? The love that showed up anyway. The song that no one saw coming. The necklace with 3 words on the back. The promise made to a little girl with a crayon drawing. The truth spoken quietly in a back room in Paris that some things outlast any result. And this was one of them. Laban always. You are not alone.